A frantic knock shattered the silence at exactly 2 a.m. in the morning. The plus-size maid rubbed the sleep from her eyes and opened the door just enough to peek outside. Her breath caught instantly. Standing beneath the flickering hallway light was the ruthless Mafia boss everyone feared. His expensive white shirt was stained with fresh blood. Rain dripped from his dark hair. The sharp scent of whiskey surrounded him. Yet his weary eyes were painfully clear. He reached for the doorframe before his knees gave way. "I need you," he whispered. Her heart pounded as he pressed a tiny flash drive into a trembling hand. "Don't let them find it." Before she could ask a single question, his body collapsed across the doorway. What secret could make the most feared man in the city trust only the woman everyone else overlooked? For several long seconds, the maid simply stared at the unconscious man lying across her doorway. If anyone from the apartment building stepped into the hallway, her life would change forever. The city's most feared Mafia boss had collapsed at her feet, bleeding onto the worn carpet outside her tiny apartment. She should have called the police. She should have walked away. Instead, she slipped one of his arms over her shoulder and struggled to pull him inside. The apartment was barely large enough for one person. A narrow couch sat against the wall beside a tiny kitchen, and an old dining table doubled as her workspace after long shifts. Everything she owned had been bought second-hand. Compared to the luxurious estates where she cleaned every day, her home looked painfully ordinary. She locked the door. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. His breathing was shallow but steady. The blood staining his shirt came from a deep cut along his shoulder rather than a gunshot wound. Whoever had attacked him had come frighteningly close to ending his life. She searched the apartment for the small first aid kit she rarely used. Her hands trembled as she cut away part of his ruined shirt. Scars covered his body, old bullet wounds, knife marks, the kind of injuries no ordinary businessman should ever have survived. The newspapers always described him as ruthless, untouchable, almost inhuman. Lying unconscious beneath the dim kitchen light, he looked nothing like the terrifying figure people whispered about. He looked exhausted. As she cleaned the wound, he suddenly grabbed her wrist. His eyes remained closed. "Don't let them find it," he muttered, his grip tightening. "They're already inside." A chill ran down her spine. Inside where? Inside his organization? Inside his home? Inside his family? He released her hand as suddenly as he had seized it. She finished wrapping the wound and covered him with the only blanket she owned. Only then did she remember the flash drive still resting in her pocket. She placed it on the table and stared at it for several minutes. He had risked everything to bring it here. He had trusted her instead of his own guards, instead of his lawyers, instead of the people who had served him for years. Why? Curiosity whispered that she should open it immediately. Common sense begged her to destroy it without ever looking inside. She sat in silence until another restless whisper drifted from the couch. "If they get it?" His breathing became uneven. "Everyone dies." The words erased her hesitation. She carried her old laptop from the bedroom and inserted the flash drive. At first, only ordinary folders appeared: financial reports, shipping records, property contracts. Nothing seemed unusual. Then she noticed a hidden directory buried beneath several layers of encrypted files. It contained dozens of videos, audio recordings, bank transfers, private messages, photographs taken in secret. The deeper she searched, the colder she became. The evidence pointed toward the same horrifying truth. The people closest to the Mafia boss had been quietly building an alliance against him for months. Trusted advisors, senior captains, financial managers, even members of the family council. Every conversation revealed another lie. Every document uncovered another betrayal. One recording captured two powerful figures discussing the exact route his convoy would take the following evening. Another listed enormous payments made to hired assassins. A third included surveillance photographs of the mansion where he lived. Someone had been watching every movement. Someone had been selling every secret. The attack tonight had never been random. It had been carefully planned. She leaned back in disbelief. The city believed the Mafia boss controlled everything. The truth was far more terrifying. His empire was collapsing from within. Suddenly, the laptop chimed. A new file opened automatically. There was only a short video. The Mafia boss sat alone behind a large wooden desk. He looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he said calmly, "it means I couldn't trust anyone else." He paused for several seconds. "I don't know who found this first. If it's one of my enemies, then I've already lost. But if it's the woman who cleans my office every Friday," his tired expression softened almost imperceptibly, "then maybe I still have one honest person left." Her eyes widened. He had known. All this time he had noticed her. Not because she spoke to him, she almost never did. Not because she wanted anything from him, she never asked. But because every week she quietly returned forgotten documents, expensive watches, loose cash, and confidential papers without taking a single dollar. While everyone around him fought for influence, she expected nothing. Perhaps that was why he had come to her door. Then the knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, not the impatient pounding of frightened neighbors, not the desperate pounding of police officers. Whoever stood outside already knew exactly who was inside. The maid quietly closed the laptop and pulled the flash drive from its port. Without thinking, she slipped it into the lining of an old apron hanging beside the kitchen. No thief would ever search inside something so ordinary. Another knock. This time, a calm voice spoke through the door. "We know he's here." Her pulse raced. She looked toward the couch empty. The blanket had fallen onto the floor. The Mafia boss was gone. For one terrifying second, she wondered if she had imagined everything. Then she noticed the open kitchen window. The rain had stopped, leaving muddy footprints on the fire escape outside. Somehow, despite his injuries, he had disappeared before the people outside reached her apartment. She unlocked the door. 4 men in expensive black suits entered without waiting for permission. None wore uniforms. None introduced themselves. One slowly scanned every corner of the apartment. Another noticed the blood-stained towel in the sink. A third picked up the discarded bandage from the trash. No one spoke. The silence was more intimidating than shouting. Finally, the oldest among them faced her. "Did someone visit you tonight?" She swallowed. "Yes." "Where is he?" "I don't know." That answer earned her a long, unreadable stare. The men searched every cabinet, every drawer, beneath the bed, inside the tiny closet, even behind the refrigerator. They found nothing. When they finally left, the oldest man paused in the doorway. "If you remember anything, our family always rewards loyalty." The door closed. She leaned against the wall, her legs too weak to stand. Hours passed without sleep. As dawn broke over the city, she forced herself to prepare for work. Missing a shift meant losing money she desperately needed for rent. She told herself that perhaps the nightmare was over. She was wrong. The mansion where she worked looked strangely tense. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Armed guards stood at every entrance. Employees whispered in frightened voices. No one smiled. The head housekeeper rushed toward her. "Where have you been?" "I was home." "Didn't you hear? The boss disappeared last night." The words echoed through the enormous entrance hall. People stopped talking. Servants exchanged nervous glances. A bodyguard hurried past carrying stacks of surveillance photographs. Within minutes, security officers gathered every employee inside the ballroom. Massive screens descended from the ceiling. A member of the family council addressed the room. "Someone betrayed our leader." His voice was calm. "But betrayal always leaves evidence." Security footage began to play. Camera after camera, street after street. Then a grainy image appeared. The Mafia boss staggered toward an apartment building shortly after 2:00 the morning. Another camera showed him entering. The building number was clearly visible. Her building. The room filled with murmurs. The next recording came from inside the hallway. She appeared at her apartment door. She helped him inside. The recording ended. The council members slowly turned toward her. "You?" Every pair of eyes followed. The ballroom fell completely silent. She tried to explain. "He was injured. I only helped him." A bodyguard stepped forward. "Where is he now?" "I don't know." Another question came immediately. "What did he bring with him?" "Nothing." It was the first lie she had ever spoken inside that house. The silence that followed was far worse than shouting. Several servants lowered their heads. Others took a cautious step away from her. People who had shared meals with her for years suddenly refused to meet her eyes. One whispered just loudly enough for others to hear, "I always knew something was strange about her." Another nodded. "No ordinary maid gets the boss's attention." Rumors spread through the room within seconds. She had seduced him. She had stolen confidential information. She had arranged the attack. Each accusation became more outrageous than the last. Yet none of them hurt as much as the disappointed expression on the old butler's face. He had always treated her like a daughter. Now even he seemed uncertain. The council ordered every employee searched. Handbags, phones, lockers, apartments, everything. She stood motionless while officers examined her belongings. Nothing was found because the flash drive remained hidden, where no one thought to look inside the faded apron hanging quietly in her kitchen. Hours later, another announcement shook the mansion. The Mafia boss still had not returned. No one knew whether he was alive. Fear quickly turned into suspicion. Suspicion became blame. And blame settled squarely on the one person seen with him last. She was escorted into a black vehicle. No handcuffs, no shouting, only complete silence. The destination was an old estate on the outskirts of the city, a place every employee knew existed but hoped never to see. The family council gathered there whenever loyalty was questioned. Inside the stone hall stood a single wooden chair beneath bright lights. She was told to sit. Around her, dozens of influential figures watched without emotion. The oldest council member spoke first. "If you are innocent, tell us where our leader is." She lowered her eyes. "I don't know." "Then tell us what he entrusted to you." Again, she answered quietly. "I don't know." Another elder slammed his hand against the table. "Enough lies." His voice echoed through the chamber. "You were the last person seen with him. You expect us to believe he came to a maid for no reason?" She remained silent not because she feared them, but because she remembered the exhausted man whispering only 4 words before collapsing. "Don't let them find it." If the people sitting before her truly included traitors, the flash drive was the only thing keeping him alive. One by one, the council members voted. The decision came quickly. Until the Mafia boss returned, she would remain the prime suspect in his disappearance. Heavy wooden doors closed behind her as guards escorted her toward a waiting holding room. None of them noticed the faint red light blinking on a security monitor in the corner. Miles away, Someone had just logged into the mansion's surveillance network, and the first face appearing on the screen belonged to the man everyone believed was either dead or never coming back. The old courtroom fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The members of the family council sat behind a long table of dark oak, waiting for the final vote. Their verdict had already been decided long before the hearing began. The maid stood alone beneath the harsh lights, surrounded by armed guards. The oldest council member slowly rose. "Since our leader has failed to return, and since this woman remains the last confirmed person to see him alive, we will proceed with judgment." A heavy wooden gavel was lifted. Then the massive entrance doors burst open. Every head turned. A cold gust of wind swept through the chamber. A single pair of polished black shoes crossed the marble floor, steady, unhurried, confident. The room froze. The Mafia boss had returned. His shoulder remained heavily bandaged beneath a perfectly tailored black suit, but his posture was as commanding as ever. The faint bruise across his face only made the silence deeper. No one had expected to see him alive. Several council members instinctively stood. Others looked genuinely frightened. No one dared speak first. His eyes swept across the room before stopping on the young maid. She looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes after days without sleep. Yet despite everything, she never lowered her gaze. For a brief moment, something softened in his expression. Then it disappeared. He walked directly toward her. A guard stepped forward. "My lord, she's under investigation." Without raising his voice, the Mafia boss replied, "So am I." The guard immediately stepped aside. The chamber remained perfectly silent as he stopped only inches from the woman who had hidden him, treated his wounds, and protected his greatest secret. He extended one hand. She understood immediately. Without hesitation, she reached into the hidden pocket sewn inside her sleeve. Before leaving her apartment that morning, she had quietly removed the flash drive from the old apron and concealed it where no search had found it. She placed it gently into his palm. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he slowly closed his fingers around it. A faint smile appeared, barely noticeable, but real. Finally, he turned toward the council. One elder spoke first. "My lord, we believe she stole confidential information." Another quickly added, "We acted only to protect the family." The Mafia boss said nothing. Instead, he walked toward the center table. A laptop was placed before him. He inserted the flash drive. Every screen inside the chamber lit up. The first image appeared, security footage. Not from outside his mansion, but from inside the private conference room where only the highest-ranking members were ever allowed. Several council members visibly stiffened. The recording showed a confidential meeting held 2 weeks earlier. One of the trusted advisors calmly outlined the Mafia boss's travel schedule. Another quietly discussed reducing the number of bodyguards assigned to his convoy. A third accepted a transfer of millions of dollars into an offshore account. The room became unbearably quiet. "No," someone whispered. Another recording followed. This time, hidden audio captured a discussion about hiring professional assassins. One voice proposed making the attack look like a robbery. Another insisted that the body should never be recovered. Several people in the chamber slowly turned toward the council table. Faces that had inspired loyalty for decades suddenly looked unfamiliar. Then came photographs, secret bank records, encrypted messages, satellite maps. Every piece of evidence fit together with terrifying precision. No accusations were necessary. The truth spoke for itself. The Mafia boss finally broke the silence. "I spent years believing loyalty could be purchased." His voice echoed calmly through the hall. "I was wrong." He looked toward the maid. "The only person who never asked for money, never asked for influence, never asked for favors, was the one person who never betrayed me. Every eye shifted toward her. Many servants lowered their heads in shame. The old butler closed his eyes, visibly relieved. One council member suddenly rose from his chair. This proves nothing. He reached toward the laptop. Before his fingers touched the keyboard, the screens changed again. A final recording appeared. It had been filmed only days before the attack. The same council member, now standing in outrage, was shown accepting payment while promising that the Mafia boss would never survive the week. His face turned pale. He staggered backward. No, this was fabricated, but nobody believed him anymore. One after another, bodyguards quietly moved into position behind the exposed conspirators. Not a single weapon was drawn. There was no shouting, no gunfire, no dramatic struggle, only overwhelming evidence. The conspirators looked around desperately, searching for allies. None remained. One by one, they surrendered without resistance. The Mafia boss watched in silence until the last traitor had been escorted from the chamber. Only then did he speak again. I survived because someone chose honesty over fear. His gaze returned to the woman standing alone beneath the lights. She had every opportunity to bargain. She never did. She could have sold this drive. She protected it. She could have saved herself. Instead, she protected me. The old council leader slowly removed the ceremonial badge from his own jacket. He walked toward the maid. With both hands, he bowed his head. I owe you an apology. His voice trembled. So do all of us. Around the chamber, servants and guards followed his example. One after another, heads lowered. The woman everyone had treated as a traitor only moments earlier now stood surrounded by silent respect. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She only looked at the Mafia boss. There was one question she still couldn't understand. Out of thousands of people, why had he trusted her? Almost as if reading her thoughts, he stepped closer. His voice dropped until only she could hear it. I still owe you an answer. Before she could respond, another bodyguard hurried into the chamber, his face drained of color. My lord, he stopped to catch his breath. We've captured everyone involved, except the person who planned it all. The Mafia boss's expression hardened. Who? The bodyguard swallowed. The mastermind was never inside this room. The words lingered in the silence. The mastermind was never inside this room. The Mafia boss remained calm. He had already suspected as much. The people arrested that afternoon had been willing participants, but none of them possessed the patience or intelligence to orchestrate a conspiracy that had unfolded over months. Someone else had stayed hidden, allowing others to take every risk. He looked around the chamber one last time. No, his voice was quiet. They won't run. Everyone waited. They've already lost everything that made them dangerous. He ordered every financial account connected to the conspiracy frozen. Every warehouse, every hidden ledger, every encrypted communication network seized before sunset. Within hours, the empire the traitors had built in secret collapsed under the weight of its own lies. For the first time in years, the organization no longer feared enemies outside its walls. It had survived the enemies within. The hearing was over. One by one, council members left the chamber in silence. Some paused to offer sincere apologies to the young maid. Others simply bowed before walking away. She accepted neither praise nor sympathy. None of it erased the fear she had lived through. When the hall finally emptied, only two people remained. The Mafia boss walked toward the large window overlooking the city. Night had fallen again. Thousands of lights stretched across the skyline. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Why did you come to me? He smiled faintly. though exhaustion still shadowed his face. Everyone around me admired my power. His eyes remained fixed on the city. They respected my position. They obeyed my orders, but very few ever looked at me as a human being. He turned to face her. "You did." She looked surprised. "I barely spoke to you." "You didn't have to." His voice carried no arrogance. "Every Friday, you cleaned my office. You returned every document you found. You placed expensive watches back on my desk. You never touched the cash left in open drawers. You never searched through confidential files. You always knocked before entering." He paused. "Do you know how rare that became?" She lowered her eyes. "I was only doing my job." "No." He shook his head gently. "You were protecting someone else's dignity." The room fell quiet once more. Then he continued. "The night I knocked on your door, I thought I needed a place to hide." He gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "I believed I needed 4 walls no one would search." His gaze softened. I was wrong. He took one slow step closer. "I wasn't looking for a place. I was looking for the only person I still trusted." Tears gathered in her eyes before she realized it. No grand confession, no dramatic declaration, only simple honesty. She smiled through the emotion. "I was terrified. I know. I almost called the police. I know. I almost threw the flash drive away." This time, he actually laughed. "I'm glad you didn't." For the first time since they met, the weight both of them carried seemed lighter. Weeks passed. The investigation quietly continued until the final architect of the conspiracy was discovered, hiding overseas under a false identity. Without loyal followers, stolen money, or access to the organization's secrets, capture came quickly. The threat that had nearly destroyed everything was finally over. Life slowly found a new rhythm. The maid returned to work, but not because she had been ordered to. She chose to stay. The mansion no longer felt cold. Servants greeted her with genuine respect. The old butler insisted she join him for tea every afternoon. Even the guards who once suspected her now smiled whenever she passed. As for the Mafia boss, he remained exactly as intimidating in public as before. His enemies still feared him. His allies still respected him. But those closest to him noticed one quiet change. He smiled more often, especially on Friday mornings. Exactly 1 year after the night that changed everything, the young woman returned to the same tiny apartment where she had once believed her future would never change. The building looked exactly the same, the narrow hallway, the faded paint, the flickering light above the door. She unlocked the apartment and stepped inside carrying groceries. A moment later, another sound followed, not knocking a key turning gently in the lock. She looked back. The Mafia boss opened the door with the spare key she had insisted he keep months earlier. He stepped inside carrying dinner instead of danger. There were no bodyguards, no blood, no whiskey, no fear, only a quiet smile. He looked around the small apartment that had once saved his life, then at the woman waiting beside the table. "A year ago," he said softly, "I arrived here believing I had lost everything." She reached for his hand. "And now," he intertwined his fingers with hers, "now I know this is the first place I've ever truly wanted to return to." She rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, the city continued chasing power, wealth, and influence. Inside the tiny apartment, none of those things mattered anymore because the most feared man in the city had finally discovered something no empire could ever buy: a home,